إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد. Last time I was here, I mentioned about the importance of striving hard to work for the Jannah, for the reward that Allah has created for us, the reward that Allah has prepared for the believers. My intention today was to talk about the description of Jannah. But last week, my brother Umar, when he talked about Tawheed, now I'm inspired to continue that topic because Tawheed is the key to Jannah. So before I talk about what's in the house, let me talk about the door, the key to open that door. Tawheed. What does it mean? Tawheed means the absolute oneness of Allah. When you hear this phrase, it is talking about that Allah alone deserves to be worshipped. When you and I say, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, say He is Allah, the one. We are emphasizing that Allah is not just one, but He's uniquely one, without any partners. He alone deserves to be worshipped. When we say Allah is one, we are talking about Allah is one when it comes to creation. He alone is the creator of the heavens and the earth. Allah is one when it comes to His attributes. Allah is one when it comes to His names and His attribute. And He is one when it comes to His lordship. Subhanallah. This is the foundation of Islam. Everything is built upon Tawheed. And what is the opposite of Tawheed? What is the opposite of the oneness of Allah? Is shirk. You and I know that the only thing that Allah will never forgive is to associate partners with Him. This is the definition of shirk. And Allah says about shirk, إِنَّهُ مَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ الْجَنَّةِ. Allah said that whoever associates partners with Allah, He has made Jannah, paradise, haram for them, forbidden for them. So for a person to even be considered to enter Jannah, you have to come to Allah with Tawheed, with the oneness of Allah, with the belief that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah alone. Subhanallah. Allah tells you and I, وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. Do not die except as Muslims, meaning do not die except that you have the belief in your heart that Allah alone deserves to be worshipped. So important. Subhanallah. One of the reasons why Allah sent His messengers is why? Allah says to us, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنْ يَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. Beautiful. Allah says that we have sent to every nation, a messenger. What was their message? أَنْ يَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ, to worship Allah alone, وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ, and to avoid idol worshiping, to avoid at-taghut. And we'll talk about it even more in details. Subhanallah. This ayah, this verse, it shows you and I that all the prophets of Allah, they were unified upon one message. That's La ilaha illallah. That no one has the right to be worshipped except Allah alone, and to avoid idol worshiping. So it's not just enough to worship Allah. You also have to reject those that are worshipped besides Allah. At-taghut, what does it mean? Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said, At-taghut refers to anything that takes you away from the worship of Allah. And some scholars, they even add more to that definition. They say, At-taghut refers to anything that is worship besides Allah Azza wa Jal. That's a Tawheed. Idols, right? These false gods. You have some leaders that take the people, that mislead people away from Allah's worship. Those are Tawheed. Fir'aun was a Tawheed because he called for people to worship him. Now, you may be thinking, like I was thinking, a Tawheed refers to those that are worshipped besides Allah. How about Jesus is worship? Can we ever refer to Jesus as a Tawheed? No. Isa ibn Maryam, yes, the Christians, they take him as someone to be worshipped. But guess what? Jesus never called the people to worship him. He made it clear. The first thing he said when he was born as a baby, Jesus, you know what he said? As a baby, Allah gave him the power to talk. He says, قَالَ إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ, I am the servant of Allah. In a different verse, he says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ رَبِّي وَرَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُوهُ هَذَا صِرَاطٌ مُسْتَقِيمٌ. Allahu Akbar. Jesus, that's what he said. He said, Allah is my Lord and your Lord. So worship Allah, not me. He made it clear. He said to worship Allah, that is the straight path. So we can't call him a Tawheed because he rejected that. He called the people to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah tells you and I, فَمَنْ يَكْفُرُ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوِثْقَى لَا انْفِصَامَ لَهَا. Allahu Akbar. Allah says that whoever disbelieves in a Tawheed, you reject those that are worshipped besides Allah, you turn away from idol worshipping, and you believe in Allah alone. You say, you know what? I'm going to submit to my Creator. I'm going to worship my Lord. Allah said, فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوِثْقَى لَا انْفِصَامَ لَهَا. Allah said, this person has grabbed onto a firm handhold. A firm, strong handhold. Subhanallah, something that will never break. You see, Allah is using a metaphor to describe the firmness of this belief in the oneness of Allah. That you believe that Allah alone deserves to be worshipped. This belief, when it enters your heart, is unbreakable. Ibn Kathir, he mentions that when a person holds on to this belief of the oneness of Allah, that Allah alone deserves to be worshipped, he said it guarantees protection from misguidance. You want Allah to protect you? Hold on to the rope of Allah. Hold on to Tawheed. Hold on to the worship of Allah. Make sure you submit to Him alone. It will protect you from falling into misguidance. He said, because this belief, it is built upon the strongest foundation. لَنْ فِصَمَا لَهَا. Allah said it will never break. Subhanallah. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would go to the market. He would say to the people, قُولُوا لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ تُفْلِحُوا. Subhanallah. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would go to the markets in Medina. He would tell the people, hey, say no one has the worship, no one has the right to be worshipped except Allah, and you will be successful. You want success? Hold on to this belief that only Allah deserves to be worshipped. Because the reason why Allah made you and I, the reason why we are created, Allah says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Allah says, I didn't create jinn nor mankind except to worship me. Subhanallah. Allah refers to the disbelievers as what? Losers. Even though we see some of these unbelievers, those non-Muslims, they are rich, they have money, they have the dunya. But Allah says about them, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. They are the losers. Why? Because guess what? They rejected the purpose of their creation. If you don't fulfill the reason that Allah gave you life, then you have lost. So those that hold on to Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, they will win. What did Allah say? قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. The believers have been successful. Because why? The believers are the ones that hold on to that Tawheed, the oneness of Allah Azza wa Jal. May Allah guide you and I. May Allah make it easy for us. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Now for those that are coming in now, I'm going to repeat again the definition of Tawheed because that's the main focus. Tawheed means the absolute oneness of Allah. That only Allah deserves to be worshipped. He is the sole creator of the heavens and the earth. Subhanallah, it is because of Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, that Allah created you and I. It is because of this belief that Allah will bless us with His mercy and enter us into Jannah. It is because of Tawheed. It is because of those that reject Tawheed, those that turn away from Tawheed. They don't want to worship Allah alone. It is because of that reason they will enter Jahannam forever. May Allah protect you and I from that. Ameen. Subhanallah. And the scholars, they made it easy for us. They define Tawheed into 3 categories, so you and I can understand it better, to understand the full concept. They say the first category of the oneness of Allah is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, the oneness of the Lordship of Allah. What does this mean? It means that Allah is the only creator, the sustainer, the provider of all that exists. We recite 17 times a day, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise and thanks be to Allah, the Lord, the Master of all that exists. Subhanallah. Brothers and sisters, Allah has full control over the dominion. Nothing happens except by the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah says, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. Subhanallah. Allah, no one has the right to be worshipped except Him. Al-Hayy, the ever-living, Al-Qayyum, the one who sustains all. تبارك الذي بيده الملك. Subhanallah. وهو على كل شيء قدير. الذي خلق الموت والحياة. Blessed is He, Allah, in whose hand is the dominion. These verses are showing you and I that Allah has supreme authority over the universe. Supreme authority, ownership. No one can stand before Allah Azza wa Jalla and say, oh Allah, I don't want to do this. No. Allah has full control over the universe. This is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. The second category is Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah or al-Ibadah. The worship of the oneness of Allah. To worship Allah alone, and we've already touched on that. This is the essence of Tawheed. To single Allah out for all acts of worship. We recite at least 17 times a day. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Oh Allah, you alone we worship. We don't worship no one else except you. This is what Islam is built upon. Subhanallah. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Guess what? We love the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He is the greatest human being that ever lived. But guess what? He does not deserve to be worshipped. The only one that deserves to be worshipped is Allah Azza wa Jal. Because some Muslims today, they go to the extreme with their love for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He is the Prophet of Allah. The Prophet himself, he said, do not exaggerate in praising me like the Christians did with Jesus. Because they love Jesus so much, well, they claim to love Jesus. Because if you claim to love someone, then follow them. But they exaggerated in their love for Jesus. The Prophet said, don't do that to me. He said, I am a servant of Allah. He said, refer to me as what? Abdullahi wa Rasuluhu. He is the servant of Allah and His messenger. And that's where we stop. And please keep in mind that dua, huwa al-ibadah, to supplicate, to ask Allah for your need, this is also worship. So don't direct your dua to no one else except Allah. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he gave his cousin Abdullah ibn Abbas. He was a young boy, little boy. The Prophet said, hey, young boy, listen. إِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ. Oh, young boy, when you ask of Allah. Look at the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He's telling him, when you make dua, make sure you only ask Allah. وَإِذَا اسْتَعَنْتَ. If you seek help, فَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ. Seek help from Allah. Subhanallah. This is teaching you and I that when it comes to the worship of Allah Azza wa Jal, it ingrains in us this love, this veneration for Allah alone. This is the second category of Tawheed. Tawheed al-Ibadah, to worship Allah alone. And the third is Tawheed al-Asma wa Sifat, the oneness of the names of Allah and His attributes. That Allah is unique when it comes to His name and His attributes. Subhanallah. We know Allah can hear, but the way He hears is unique to Him. Subhanallah. Allah Azza wa Jal says to us in Surah Al-Ikhlas, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. He ends this verse by saying, He ends this surah. Allah says, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. There is no one equal or comparable to Allah. So make sure as Muslims, we affirm, we believe in the names and attributes of Allah as they were taught to us in the Quran and the Sunnah. That's where we stop. Whatever the Prophet said, whatever the Quran said, Sami'na wa ata'na. We believe that Allah has names and attributes that are unique to Allah Azza wa Jal. And I will end with this, subhanAllah. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he came to one of his companions, Mu'adh ibn Jabal. He says, Ya Mu'adh, oh Mu'adh, atadri ma haqqullahi ala al-ibad. Oh Mu'adh, do you know what is the right of Allah upon His servants? What is the right of Allah upon His servants? So Mu'adh, he says, Allah and His Messenger, they know best. The Prophet says, قَالَ أَن يَعْبُدُوهُ وَلَا يُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. The right of Allah upon you and I is that we worship Allah alone and never associate partners with Him. Don't worship anyone except Allah. If we do that, the Prophet said, Ya Mu'az, atadri ma haqquhum alayh. Do you know what is the right of the servants upon Allah? So our right is conditional. If we fulfill the right of Allah, we worship Allah alone, we stay far away from shirk. If we do that, the Prophet says, Allah yu'adhibahum. He will not punish them. Subhanallah. Look at the strength of this, of Tawheed, the oneness of Allah Azza wa Jal. May Allah Azza wa Jal make you and I of those that are going to die upon Tawheed. May Allah Azza wa Jal make us of those that will die as Muslims. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة